All right, welcome back everybody to day 5 of $0 Landlord Bootcamp. So today is my favorite lesson because we're going to be covering advanced concepts and strategies. So this is going to be a little bit, either your brain's going to really enjoy this stuff or it's not going to make a lot of sense, in which case I got a lot of different concepts, so just stay on board until the end. But if you haven't already seen day 1 through 4, then you're definitely going to want to go look at those so you have a little base level of understanding. Okay, so again, if you didn't already know, what's this bootcamp about? It's about teaching a high-density free course that enables everybody to buy a multifamily property for no money. The purpose is, of course, to give value out, and eventually you might need a business partner, in which case, great. Otherwise, it is zero. So you can just take everything I got in my head experience, whatever, and you can make your own interpretations on it. You can also pay me for 60 seconds online at $0landlord.com/feedback. Spend some time with this presentation. It'd be great if you spend some time with 60 seconds. All right, here's a quick case study. So about $250K mobile home park for $335K in September 2023. So overpaid by $83K. But I bought it for 0% down, and we fixed all the property management issues in 75 days. So that led to us tripling the net income, and we ended up getting the property appraised for $800K in September 2024. That's a $465K gain, so we over 2x the value of the property. And we did this 100% remote, never even been to the property. So it's about with 2 other partners, and we all ended up having less work because we use skill leverage. And I have 40% ownership in that, so it's $186K profit. And I do this for 1 hour a week on average, which means I make $3,500 an hour on that property. All right, that is higher than the top 25 jobs in the U.S. combined times 1.5. And I've done this over a dozen times. If you want to look at my stuff and figure out if I'm worthy of teaching anything, that is totally fine. I want to make sure I'm over-credentializing myself for anything that I'm talking about as much as humanly possible. But I'll leave that up to you to make the determination. So go look on there and you'll see all my stuff. All right, more stuff about me. I made $7 billion of U.S. Air Force research on my previous W-2, and then I ended up getting out of that, and I started multifamily investing at the same time while I was working my W-2 in August 2022, and I ended up buying 8 figures of stuff. That's 300 units roughly. And I did pretty much all of it for no money out of pocket. And I bought 80% of it all within the course of 12 months, man. So the top 200 mobile home park buyers in the U.S. as well, according to that source. And if you want to see more about me or my background or other stuff, then head on over to the website. And I've partnered with 6 people to buy their first rentals for $0 for free. And most of them did it over 100 rentals, and they did that in under 1 year. So that's no hidden catch. Like, this does work. Let's make money together. Okay, so I removed the table of contents of this one just because I want to make it a little more efficient. So we're going to talk about theory of constraints. So if you don't know, there's a author named Goldratt. This is his last name. But this is applicable to pretty much every concept we're going to be talking about is applicable outside of specifically just real estate, but I'm going to try to tie it in as much as possible because you probably don't care about a car or business or whatever, right? You're here for real estate. So, excuse me while I mute. All right, sorry, I was losing my train of thought there. Please make sure you guys are keeping it muted the whole time. All right, so for theory of constraints, it is frequently going to be, a good example is frequently going to be premature optimization, right? So that is you are solving the wrong constraint and you're trying to optimize a problem that doesn't actually necessarily need to be optimized. So as you can see here, it's like this little bit of a constraint. Sorry guys, it's just the distraction threw me off. The constraint is the smaller of the 2 constraints here. All right, cool. Now we got that solved. The smaller of the 2 constraints is the one that you need to solve, right? It's not the larger constraint. It's the smaller of the 2. So you need to solve. Geez, sorry, guys, that really threw me off. I almost want to stop the recording, but I'll just keep on rolling. All right, you have to fix the correct constraint at the end of the day, right? So corporate swag is not going to get you more deals. Over-designing your website does not matter at the end of the day, right? It is actually solving what needs to be solved. And most people constraints, if you didn't already know what it is that you're just not picking up the phone and calling, right? So you just have to make contact with people. All right, critical path theory. So critical path is the longest path from the start to the end of the project, passing through all the essential tasks to the project's completion, right? That's a complicated definition, but it's not too bad. So it's the longest path that it's going to take. And I can get out of the way of the picture here. You can see it even better. So the longest path from the start to the end, right? So if you're solving something that's not going to change the longest time frame, then you're not solving the right constraint in that particular one, right? This is the theory of constraints applied to time. So don't work things out that are out of order. So for instance, don't try to fund a deal before you even have one. It's a total waste of time. Pick up the phone, start dialing, right? Go get the deal first. Then you can worry about optimizing everything else later. Then you can worry about making things faster later. All right, expected value. So if we play this game where you get $3 if it lands on heads and you lose $1 when it lands on tails, you're probably going to want to play that game every single day, right? All the time, constantly. You're just going to be making $2 every single time you flip, right? So how this looks is you are all right, how this looks is the weighted average is of all possible outcomes in an event, right? So this likelihood of A times outcome of A minus likelihood of B times outcome of B. So 1% chance of 1% chance, sorry guys, I had the clerical error in there, of 100K every time you call somebody, you have a $1,000 expected value gain every time you call, right? So if it's 100K, if I get it, and they say yes every time I pick up the phone, but it's a 1% chance, then I'm not losing any money really in that scenario. I'm just losing my time, which you could equate that to money. But that basically means every time I pick up the phone, I would be having a $1,000 option, or the outcome would be on average $1,000, right? If you don't like math, too bad. So just get used to dealing with it. Everybody else is doing this. This is why you might be falling behind. So pick up the phone, start dialing, right? I've drilled it home 3 times. But hopefully you can understand why now a little bit better. Okay, now we're going to talk about bell curve distribution. We were talking about this the other day, and I totally fumbled the explanation of it. But this is going to be applying to your skill underwriting, spotting deals, funding deals, and a good example of that would be like a weird buy box, right? So what side of this graph is somebody going to be on for percent match if you have everything that they want? And then you also have that one little weird buy box item of like, it has to have a pink roof and it can't have ghosts, right? So if you have a very, very, very high percentage match, i.e. all the way on the right side of the bell curve that way, then you are going to probably be able to sell that for higher than anybody else because you have such a high match on that at the end of the day. So in order to push far left or far right on the bell curve, you have to really try. Either you have to really screw up or you have to really try to do well. And this could apply to literally anything, right? So this could be your understanding of one particular concept. If you're on the average and somebody else is on the extreme, then that person can maybe a really good asset to bring on board so that you don't have to go learn that concept as well. So just really try to think about it, no matter what, is where are you on the curve, right? And this is utilized for lots and lots and lots of different concepts. And I actually have, oh man, I want to see if I got that. I have one of these, like an office toy, and basically it drops all the beads. And if you flip it upside down and you flip it back the other way, it literally will form this every single time. It's a bell curve. So this is just mathematical likelihood. A quick item to note is 68% will fall in the first, what's known as standard deviation. So this would be like, I don't know, number of questions left to right that you ask the seller. So the more questions you ask, then the more data you can have. The more data you can have, the more likelihood you can get of somebody that's way up here on the far right extreme, right? So if you have, by the way, if you need to know what questions to ask, go online to the website on zero.landlord.com. I got a giant master due diligence checklist that is free for everybody to use. Okay, so now it's going to be rights laws. So for rights law, it's kind of like this, right? It's like a cost decline over time. So the more you do stuff, the more efficient you get. Is like a really, really simple way of putting it. This is very frequently used in manufacturing science, actually, which is, if you, it's the incremental the cumulative doubling of all productions of a particular unit is going to lead to an incremental decrease of the cost of the unit. So this is almost like Moore's law for computing, but instead this is for production. So this applies to other things outside of manufacturing science, though, too. So just put in the reps. So if you say, I've been going to the gym for 6 months and have no progress, then you didn't really actually go that much, right? So make sure you're actually putting in the reps. The more reps you do at the end of the day, then the better it will, the more practice you'll be, the more efficient your whole process will be. So make sure you don't get shelf esteem, by the way, too. So I heard this the other day. It's people that want to just buy their way around hard work, right? And this came from somebody called David Dodge. So, and if you want to know how to 10x your income, I'll just let you think about it for a second. All right, what's the best way to 10x your income? You 10x your calls, right? Pick up the phone, start dialing. Like, you have to put yourself out there. You have to be okay to confront the unknowns of, I don't know how to deal with that issue. Additionally, more companies, if you are making the reps, more companies are going to dive into digestion than starvation. So if you're like, oh, well, I'm just not going to call at all, or if I call, then I'm going to call too many, but I'm never even going to bother to learn how to actually underwrite it. No, don't outsource things you haven't already done or you can't optimize yourself. So if your knowledge level is a 5 out of 10 on a certain topic and you hire somebody else, that other person cannot do a 6 out of 10 unless you're bringing on somebody that is really experienced and knows more. But you cannot really quality control somebody that is below your experience level very well, because they'll only be able to come up to your experience level. Okay, here's another item as well. So this is really, really critical to think about, is in your day-to-day life, what items are you doing to accelerate your business or to further your personal agenda, whatever that might be. So something known as the Pareto principle is oddly common in nature. It's where 80% of the effort leads to 20% of the results, but then 20% of the effort leads to 80% of the results. So how you need to be thinking about this is, what is it that you are doing in your day that is the 80%, and what is it you're doing in the day that's the 20%? Because the odds are the 20%, if you can just find whatever that 20% is and maximize it, that's a lot more efficient. So if you notice, this is a 25% return on the 80% to 20% versus this 4x return, 20% to 80%. If you didn't already watch the CapEx return on invested capital slide from day 4, slide 23, then you should go check that out, because that is really, really critical to look at property renovation that way as well. Okay, here's something else, which is this rule is used to know when to make a decision. So you want to make a decision after you've reached 37% into a certain data set. Right, so it's saying that after reviewing 30% of available options, you've gathered enough information to make a well-informed decision. So what this stems from is, it was a secretary who is reviewing applications for somebody that needs to work at a company. So if there's 100 applications, when should you decide to hire the person? Do you need to go vet all 100 applications all the way through? Right, because perhaps there's a time constraint that if you don't hire them that day, then you end up losing the application altogether and they go work at a different company. So mathematicians, but actually one particular mathematician really explored this concept. And what was funny is he actually looked at it and he said, how many women do I plan on, this is a true story, by the way, I don't know the mathematician's name, but you can look it up. But he said, how many women do I plan on seriously dating? Not kind of sort of dating like a fling. It's like, how many people do I plan on having the end result be seriously dating? And he came up with a number in his head. It was like, it was going to be 15. So then he tried to skip the 80%, so to speak, of the non-serious relationships, and he just targeted 20% of the serious relationships using Pareto principle. But then he ended up looking at it and said 15 people total times times 0.37, so 37%. The outcome was around like 5 to 6. So what it told him is, he said, okay, I'm going to on the 5th or the 6th person that I've dated, if I haven't already found somebody that's like the one, then the next best person that I find, I will marry them. And then that was literally actually became his wife, right? So they actually hit it off. So it's kind of funny how that works. But yes, the 37% rule. So if you are looking at a million deals that you can close with your capital, you should only look 37% into the data set and then pick the next best one after 37% is reached. That's the general takeaway, right? Or whatever else you want to apply it to. And by the way, here's a really interesting math fact. This is derived, and it's so simple. How they came up with 37% is literally 1 divided by the natural logarithm, which is e, right? So long story short, 37% into a data set, that's when you need to be able to make a decision. But try not to make it at the beginning, because you haven't explored enough. If you wait too long, you haven't committed enough. Okay, this is called region beta paradox, and you may have seen this on like podcasts or whatever, because people like talking about this stuff. So goals are actually really, really dangerous if you don't do them the correct way, because it will put you into region beta paradox very, very quickly. So I had here's a quick goal that I had for personal stuff, right? So I had a goal that when I started my first job, so I didn't really have that much money. It was 10K to my name. And I said, I want to have a net worth, not cash. I want to have net worth, because it's like, cumulative wealth, etc., post-tax, of $250K within 5 years. My comfortable W-2, though, held me back mentally, because I was on track to actually hit that. So great, I was hitting it. Why do I even care to push it even further, right? So I established this very naive goal years before it became relevant, and it held me back actually for quite some time until I realized that I was like, hey, that's a really stupid goal. So change happens when the delta, i.e. the difference, required to be happy reaches a critical point. So what happened during those 5 years is I ended up managing a lot of money, and I understood, I can save a lot of money, which means I can also make a lot of money. And then I crushed the 250K goal multiple times over, and I was like, wow, goals are really stupid. So I actually warned a lot of people. It's like, be very careful if you're making goals not to put yourself in a region beta paradox, like region beta, that is, right? So here's an example. All right, bad on here, you got your region beta here, and then here's great over here. So happy as a goat, sad as a man, or whatever. So here's David Goggins is watching, right? So you are probably too comfortable in your life right now to make any meaningful change, whatever the aspect is, right? It doesn't mean like your entire life. It could be your marriage, it could be your weight, it could be your finances, whatever. But for purposes of real estate, it's your comfortability perhaps with working or working efficiently or learning new things. Whatever it is, there is something in your life where you are chilling in the region beta, and you need to figure out what that is so that you can make yourself uncomfortable with it. So try to force yourself into situations. I don't have another Jordan Belfort thing on here, but yeah, pick up the phone and start dialing would be a great example, right? Most people are very uncomfortable on the phones, asking questions. They don't know what questions to ask. Go to the website. I got a whole list of questions you can ask. 286 of them, counting. Okay, here's this is supposed to be animated, so I kind of gave it away. But this is for legal writing, right? So legal writing in a nutshell. It's not that tough. You just need to practice. And you can survive a tough opponent, but you have to do it carefully, right? So it's the trick is not writing a contract, it's writing one that can survive a tough opponent, i.e. like an attorney that's suing you, right? You can still beat it though. So experience times time times miscellaneous factors equals outcome. That's how I like to define it, particularly for legal is usually where I use this as a formula. So a good example would be a legal skill 100 player, right? So it's like a really, really good lawyer who spends 10 minutes on something could be beaten by somebody who has basically no legal experience who's willing to put in the time, right? So I frequently am like just outworking like somebody who's just way higher skill level than I am on anything that's like legal in particular. We've had lots of like potential lawsuits, like demand ladders and whatnot, and I have just put in enough time in advance to stay way ahead of the game so that I already have all my stuff in advance ready to go. And then I am going out and I'm researching all the state law, I'm researching all the county law, everything else. And a lot of times these are like BS type of lawsuits. Like they're not legitimate. If there is something legitimate we ever do, like, if we're liable for stuff, we immediately try to settle because obviously we're not trying to fight something we're going to lose and we don't want to be, bad landlords, etc. But it's usually stuff like evictions or whatnot. But yeah, you can absolutely beat out attorneys. So I don't have to go out and hire an attorney for stuff if I'm willing to just put in the time. You have to use critical thinking on it too, right? So the higher your critical thinking, the higher your experience, the more time you put in, the higher your likelihood. And I put miscellaneous factors because there's a lot of variables that go into this kind of stuff. But generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, miscellaneous factors isn't going to impact you that much. So yeah, and then here's legal writing definitions, by the way. So this is what goes into a contract, by the way. I should have put that at the header. So there's the offer, which is a promise proposal to enter into an agreement, right? So it just says like, we are calling this an offer. This is exactly what it is. And it's usually for something monetary, which we'll get into. The acceptance is the very clear signature block, essentially, right? And it's also them saying, yes, I know exactly what I'm signing. I'm signing away for everything. And I understand that this is the exact situation. Consideration is usually money, but it's like what's to be gained by the other person. Sorry about the formatting. Capacity is the mental capacity typically. So they can't be drunk. They can't be mentally retarded, like by legal definitions. If they're blind, you can't have them sign a paper copy. Like, come on, stuff like that would be ridiculous, right? Very easy to shoot that down and say that's not a legal contract. Legality as well. Oh, by the way, on capacity, this was a fun one, and obviously I'm not going to name the property, or the specific lawsuit, but we had an eviction against a professional tenant, as we like to call them, like tenants that really know how to just like game the system, and they had they showed up to court and they said, oh, well, we don't have our glasses, so we can't. We don't have the glasses right now. We couldn't have read the lease at the time, even though we signed it. So we just didn't have the capacity to because we were basically blind. So So I instructed with my attorney. I was like, great. I want them to ask how they got here. Right? So it's like, did you drive here? Oh, great. So the DMV thinks you're good enough for capacity. And then additionally, the verbiage in question, I had actually put on the lease. Because there was one particular issue about like an HVAC, which we were very upfront. We said the HVAC does not work. The tenant's responsible. I had put it in bold, big font, and a yellow, and I put it on the last page, and they had signed right next to it with an initial as well. So I was able to shoot that down very, very quickly and be like, well, they clearly knew what the hell they were signing because, they've demonstrated capacity to it. Also, it's ridiculous to assume that something is giant, bold, and yellow on like max font on the last page that they signed right next to, that they're going to claim that they didn't have the visual capacity to do so. Kind of nuts, right? So you're not usually going to run into an issue with capacity. That's just a little fun story. And then legality as well. So that's going to be the local laws basically are going to take precedence. So you can't do something that's in contradiction to a local law or a federal law. And then awareness. So you have to actually know what you're signing. This has kind of become more of a this has become like a bigger thing in more recent times, just because people are kind of getting their way out of lawsuits and contracts. So I'm not an attorney by any means, by the way, so I'm not like giving this as like this is specifically legal advice, but you'll see like on subject to deals, for instance, that like they have like 1 million signatures right next to the thing that says, yes, I understand that I'm selling my property subject to. So you just have to make sure it's demonstrated in awareness. The best way I like to do that is put it in super simple, non-legal speak, because that's a lot easier to protect it like that. So long story short, it's not complicated, but here's some basic guidelines, but you should probably just practice writing contracts yourself. So as long as you hit these, you are good. You can write it. You don't have to be a lawyer certified in order to go out and make a contract. It could be written on a napkin. As long as it has all this, you're good. Okay, so, whoops, that's section that was supposed to be skipped. All right, but yeah, path to performa, I guess I'll talk about it real fast. So basically, you just want to make like a giant list of all your repairs that you need to do, or all the actions you need to do in order to get to your future pro forma state. So I highly recommend that you do that as well and be very, very detailed with that. So I was going to include an example on that, but I'll get that on the next version. So, okay. Take every deal you can is a huge concept that a lot of people just don't like to hear, and they always think it's like, especially if I'm like the one saying it and I'm also like, oh, by the way, you can partner with me. People are like, well, that sounds like you're just telling me that you want to make all the money and I get 1%. That's not at all what I'm saying. I don't care who you deal with, but you absolutely need to get through your first deal of ownership. Then you have experience, right? So you can get paid in experience, and most people pay for that via education, right? So you can get paid, but most people pay for it. So it's kind of silly it's a silly argument at all. It's like, dude, you should pay to work on a deal. Are you kidding me? That's really valuable knowledge. But people complain when they say, I'm not making that much money. Not about the money. It's about the experience. That's why you're there, on the first one in particular. So, and if you don't make money, you get paid in experience at the end of the day. So there's a good saying that says, money gets the experience and experience gets the money, right? And that's essentially boiling down saying skill leverage. So if you have zero freaking skill because you don't have any, you don't have any experience, then you don't get to justify saying you make $1 million on stuff. That comes later after you have the skill. So I would chase the skill because it will get you to the high dollar an hour. And you still got to pay for it somehow. So at the end of the day, it's either time or it's money if you want to get experience. Don't do this. Don't go out and buy a course on anything. Anybody that says, hey, I got a course for sale, a lot of times people that are making courses for money are not actually good at their job. Otherwise, they wouldn't be trying to pivot all of a sudden like that. So if there's a paid course out there, I would probably try not to do it. Yeah, only 20K rupees, says chat. That's funny. All right. Okay, so here's a really cool one. So this is, of course, I'm going to brand it with my last name, Bartlett, because I have not seen anybody else do this. And this is how to get negative risk on property. And I'm going to go in more detail here. I'll show you the actual table. So if you're buying multiple properties, you allocate the debt that specifically to different properties. So you're going to put the collateral against A, B, or C, depending on the situation. And you're going to do that very, very specifically so that you get negative risk and you can get capital sooner, right? So if I said, hey, you can get capital after 3 months of owning something and you have no more risk in the deal. It's like, well, that sounds insanely awesome. Of course I want to do that. So you can go on the website. I just made this. It's on zero.landlord.com/resources/negative risk method. and there's a QR code. I'm going to go ahead and show you what this looks like, though. You should probably go online and download this, though. Still, it's free. Okay, so let me zoom in a little bit. All right, just don't skip ahead too much. Assume that you are buying $1 million of property and it's worth exactly $1 million. So you're not walking into extra money or anything like that, right? It's just you are buying what it's paid for. So and it's worth actually really, we'll call it like yep, perfect. Okay. So here's our fair market value is $1 million. NRI is that. Here's fair market cap rate is like that. So then we're going to say our price is $1 million. And since we're doing 90% debt, we're going to call it $900K. All right, so that's step one. So that's the assumption at the beginning. So then we're going to say, what are the actual values in between? So you're going to look at the net income of each property, and you're going to assume your own fair market cap rate, depending on the property condition, etc. So before price version 1, that's your prices here. And based off of the value, so price minus value or value minus price is going to give you your property equity. So now you're going to actually have positive or negative equity, and you're going to calculate that to see which ones are positive and which ones are negative. Right? So on these properties, we're going to assume this is how the debt gets split up. It's $900K total across 10 properties. We're calling it $90K a piece, just peanut butter spread, nice and even. Well, here's what you do then next is you take the properties with positive equities and you price them lower, and then the ones with negative equities, you price them higher. Right, so that's going to essentially what that means is you're taking the ones that you already have a lot of money in, and you're just going to make it even more money. And you're going to have the ones that you already have a negative money in, and make them even more negative, right? Because there's always going to be some amount of fluctuation of positive, negative relative to each other, pretty much, right? So we got 1 through 10. We got our fair market cap rate. Well, we already did that. Price was that before. We already know our equity. That was what our debt was before. This is version 1. Now we're going to change it, so it's version 2. So notice this 100K, we put it down to 80K. This 100K, we put it up to 120K. I'm going to paste that, fix the formatting. So now our equity before was 7,000-ish, and now it's 27,000-ish, right? So we're also going to be applying our debt slightly differently there. So our debt's the same, it's 900K, and our price is the exact same. But if you look at it, now we have all the positives, you add them up, is 100K, and all the negatives, if you add them up, is like 108K. Right? So a lot bigger spread. Before it was 38 and 38, now it's 108 and 108. So in theory, if you sold off all the positive equity ones, you would get 108K, and then you'd be left with basically negative equity in the property. Right? So let's see if it shows you here. So this is what it would look like if you actually sold it. Right? So you'd sell these for fair market value, and our remaining property equity right there is highlighted, or it's in this cell, 65. So it's negative 38K. And then our equity that's remaining in the property is negative 108K. Because again, you took it out, but it had zero equity to begin with. But you took it out of specifically certain properties. So now you have 108K in your pocket, but now you have something. The remainder is $603,000 of debt, but you only have $561,000 of property value, right? So you actually have more debt than you have property value in this situation. So, and you can look at the right here. So fair market value, 561. The debt is now higher than the property value. But remember, you bought it at 90% loan to value, but now you're above 100% loan to value. So in theory, if you defaulted on the loan, you would actually gain. Now, I am not advocating that you do intentionally advocate on the loan. That would be really crappy. And also, you don't want to do that because it's unethical, in my opinion. So, but if you went bankrupt for some crazy reason, or you got hit by a bus and you got crazy amount of medical debt, you were going to thank your lucky stars that, the world forced your hand and you have 108K out of the property, and this is structured in a manner where you have negative equity in the property. So again, don't intentionally default on stuff. And also, if you are a guarantor of debt, this does not necessarily work the same. So if you are personally liable to pay back $603,000 and you have $561,000, you can't really just default on it. That's not what I'm saying. But you could just ride this out for a little bit. So you can just continue to operate the property for the next 4 years, and eventually it gets back to break even for the remainder that's left in there. That's a totally acceptable way. All right, back to slide deck. Okay, so now we're going to talk about advanced buying negotiations, right? So I want everybody here to actually really try to participate in this exercise in your mind, right? So think about, what is your favorite color? Is it teal or is it light pink? Right? Get the answer in your head. Which of the two do you like more? Now, what's your actual favorite color, right? Probably weren't paying attention to the question because you were looking at their possible choices. So present a few simple options to the seller and don't ask for permission to offer, right? If your actual favorite color was red or something, then you didn't even answer red. You answered either A or B. So make sure you're using this in order to keep it really, really simple for the seller. And this isn't like trickery necessarily. You're just simplifying the choices really far down. Because if I say, well, what is the exact possible permutations of everything that you could ever possibly look for in selling your property? It's like, that's infinite results. I have to narrow it down. Do you like A or do you like B? That's it. I'm going to give you A and B too. And I'm not even going to ask you if it's okay to send B. I'm going to just send it. I hear this too, by the way. A lot of people are, hey, I was curious. Are you looking to, get an offer on your property? Dude, just freaking give them an offer and give them two offers too. This is seller finance. This is cash. I'm sending it to your inbox right now. Don't ask for permission. You're going to miss a ton. Just literally send it. That's it. So yeah, here's your two offers. A, 100K, 10% interest, or B, 90K, 12% interest. Okay, advanced buying negotiations. So buy your fitness coach right now, right? That's one way to put it. So you got to buy something. You got to exhibit pain. You got to pay for stuff. And it's going to be a coach that's going to probably yell at you. Versus you can say, hey, get shirtless on the beach with confidence, right? Tie it to an outcome. That is what you really want to be learning out of this. Is tie it to an outcome, right? So this is Hormozi value formula. You can work on either the top or the bottom. So you could say, but you don't want to present it where you are saying, hey, it's going to cost you stuff for what I'm selling you, right? That is what this buy your fitness coaching right now. That's, buy your fitness coaching right now would be saying, hey, there's more effort and sacrifice here. Right. Also, time delay, like maybe it's not convenient actually. So that's actually more effort and sacrifice. So it's not really time delay on that one. Get shirtless on the beach with confidence. Right. That's higher dream with higher likelihood. Like they could say get shirtless on the beach this summer with confidence, and that would reduce time delay. That would be even a better way to do it for $0. Right. That's even better. So the pain is the pitch. That's a quote from Alex Hormozi. The sellers usually want dream outcomes. So that's typically going to be like price, and that's going to end up hurting you. But you can just solve the bottom half as well. There's another way to think about this. So that's something a lot of people don't do, and this because time, effort, and sacrifice are painful, and they're not focusing on the pain points. And this is kind of the same concept as cap rate compression, right? So if I just make it easier to run for somebody, I can justify a lower percentage cap rate. That's like saying if I just make everything on the bottom, all the bad stuff, less bad, then I can make it easier on the next person. Okay, if you haven't already seen this movie, I would, we'll explain here in a second, you'll understand, right? So Inception, the movie is like they go into somebody's like dreams and they modify his thought behavior, right? So it's not about if the seller wins at the end of the day, it's about if they think they're winning. And it's best interest to either make them think it's their idea when they come up with something, or at the very least, don't make it be your idea, right? Because then they can attack that, essentially. And the seller is determining their own dream outcome, not you. So it's not like I'm saying don't make the seller actually win and actually get what they want. But the point is, it's an emotional decision. It's how they feel, right? So they have to think that they're winning at the end of the day. Here's a really good example. Is Facebook Marketplace buyers that drive 2 hours to go get like a $5 thing, right? That's insane. It's like you're spending 2 hours of your time one way, both trips. That's 4 hours, assuming like, I don't know, whatever dollar an hour you want, call it even 10 or 500, whatever. That is a huge time cost, plus the actual like depreciation of the vehicle the whole time you're driving, plus the cost of, insurance risk as well. That's from expected value, plus the actual gas just for a $5 item. Like that's not worth the cost savings, right? But for them, they feel like it's a good deal, which is why they do it. So the point is, you're not there to actually, like you should try to actually solve it, but at the end of the day, they will just execute whatever they feel is a win. So it's really important that you make them think that it's their own idea, because it's going to be their own feelings rather than you projecting your feeling of a winning scenario onto them. So just try to solve what they say they want, but don't be afraid to go outside the box a little bit in order to really try to get them to win. And then also Facebook stalk. So and what I mean by that is don't do it in like a super creepy way. Just like look them up on Facebook. If they got a mugshot of them in jail, that might not be a very good person to work with, right? So like as a profile picture, I've seen that before. I was hiring an employee literally the guy had that in his profile picture. I was like, well, I'm not going to hire you. So, I'm going to pass that one. So just do like 2 seconds of research on the person you're talking to, basically. And then another one is if they have kids, then like if you see them on Facebook like that, then bring it up, because kids are a really strong motivator. Don't you want to have more time with your kids? Don't you want to have more financial security for your kids? Don't you want to have less issues and risk, etc.? You can just really drive it home with the kids factor at the end of the day. And then this is a really good rule of thumb, is the 3x rule. So if you are Claire, it's supposed to be 6 hours, my bad. If you plan on negotiating for 2 hours, you need to be spending 6 hours negotiating. And that's for like the really serious negotiations. So that's like after you've done your level 1, your level 2, your level 3 underwrite, you're at the closing table or whatever, and if stuff is popping up. Or you could even apply it sooner if you want to. Just understand it might be a little bit of a waste of time. But if I'm planning on being on the phone with a seller for like 10 minutes, talking and negotiating about stuff, I'm going to do 30 minutes of prep minimum. So every giant, big, really important negotiation I've ever done in my life, I've spent way more than 3x, and it's worked out perfectly every time. Like I get exactly what I want out of the end of the day, and so does the seller. So a good example of that is we're buying a deal right now in Pennsylvania, and the property in question, turns out it's multiple owners, it's an inherited thing, and like one of them's a stickler, he doesn't want to sell his piece. And I figured out what the reason was without even having to talk to the guy on the phone, because I did a lot of prep work in advance. Turns out that guy's address is adjacent to the property that we're buying that is getting split up, but it was through like a trust, and I just couldn't figure it, or it was through like an LLC, so we couldn't really see it super easily like that. But that makes sense. Why would you want a bunch of development going on in your backyard? Right? It kind of makes him feel like he's got to move now. He's losing a lot of sense of security. So guess what I do the second I pick up the phone with him? Well, not the second, but I steer the conversation towards like, well, this is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to like develop the whole area. That'd be crazy. And we really want to, make sure that we're respectful of all the neighbors nearby. So, here's what we're thinking on the property, blah, blah, blah. Right. So he knows like what our plan is before we've even had to put it out there. So he thinks it's a win by default. So try to just do some prep work in advance. All right, advanced approaching, right? So if you're approaching somebody that's got something that you want, I don't care if it's knowledge, I don't care if it's, hey, Mr. Seller, I really need you to, answer the phone so I can go give you an offer on your property, whatever. If you're approaching anybody for anything, pre-digest your information, right? Do not spew out 50 paragraphs of stuff. That is insane. You have to do like 3 sentences or less every time. If you are asking for anything, try to put it as clean and concise as possible. Like if you're sending an email, reread it and then reread it again and reread it again, right? If you don't care about your reputation at all, and you don't care how other people perceive it, don't regard the slide whatsoever. But if you do care and you want people to say, dadgum, I love working with that guy, do this. Pre-digest your freaking information every time. Especially if you're asking for advice from somebody, try to answer the daggum question yourself. If you aren't, you are being very disrespectful to that person at the end of the day, because you're basically saying, I am too lazy to even bother to help myself, and I think you know basic stuff, and that's what you're here for, rather than like trying to access advanced stuff. So if I want to go talk to, somebody who's worth $1 billion, do you think I'm going to ask them like, well, how do I Google that? It's like, no, dude, like do the freaking work, right? So you gotta go in between on it. Obviously, you don't have to go to the absolute max. It's not like you're going to the White House or whatever, but just it's perceived pretty much every time as disrespectful if it's a seller, and they're like, what do you mean you don't know if I own another house on the same street? Like they kind of sometimes expect you to know that. So just actually do your research in advance and don't spew out a bunch of stuff over email or text. Like just make it very clean and concise so people know what you actually want. So a quick thing I do as well, by the way, here's another point, is the less everyone's going to care less than you, so you just have to care more, right? That is a simple fact. I care more about my business than anybody else does because it's my business, right? So it's very silly of me to expect anybody else is going to care more than I am going to care about my stuff. That's kind of weird. So what I do on a lot of emails that are very important, or if I'm sending it to like a very high net worth person, I put at the top of the screen here, or like the very first line, I say, 3-minute, 22-second read. Like down to the second. Like I literally do that. Like I pre-digest it so well, and it's very, very clean email. Like I'm not just spewing out a bunch of nonsense, begging for them to go spend 20 minutes deciphering what the heck I'm trying to say. Right? So pre-digest your information every time. It is a very, very good skill to do. And it's something you want to practice on like your day-to-day. Additionally, people naturally have guards that go up. right? So if you're approaching somebody and you want something from them, try to do it in a way where it's not going to have their guards go up. So if you say, hey, can I get 60 seconds of feedback on this deal before I post for funding? That is not the same as saying, can you fund my deal? That is you saying, hey, I realize I'm going to be a little more humble, and I'm going to say, hey, maybe I didn't get everything perfect on this. So I'd love your feedback because you would know a lot, and I would really like your feedback particularly. And it's only going to cost you 60 seconds, right? So if you approach it like that, they might be a little bit more willing to do it. Additionally, you don't even need to specify the value. They can intuit it, right? So just like the Inception, picture like I was showing, make them think it's their, that they're the ones winning. If I'm a limited partner and I'm looking to fund a deal and somebody says, hey, can you give me 60 seconds of feedback on this before I post it? Dude, if I like the deal, I'm going to be like, dude, I should just fund this deal. Are you kidding me? Right? So it's like, then it's my idea. It's not your idea as pitching it to me. And I'm not going to have my defenses go up, basically. So that is a very, very powerful strategy. But yeah, so obviously you don't even need to specify the value in there. It becomes their idea. All right, advanced team functions, right? Bring an agenda beforehand and vector towards clear deliverables. So I can go all the way back to the very first slide, but it's like, this is a high density course designed for people who are trying to buy multifamily property for no money out of pocket, right? That's very clear. Like, we know exactly what it is, and it's free. I'm not like, maybe it's costs, whatever. So it is very clear deliverable. You know exactly what this entire course is now about, because I'm having an agenda beforehand, such as that. And if we were going to have a discussion like, well, what's the next step? I'm going to do everything I can to vector towards a concrete deliverable that actually can be executed. Additionally, try to spend some social time with people that you're working. Like, don't just work the whole time. So sometimes though, it is social. So for me, doing some random business project on the side is fun for me, and I'll just stay up till 2 a.m. doing that, and I'll do it with some other people, and that is kind of sort of social time. But you want to make sure you have a good relationship with everybody you're working with. So don't just boil it down to saying, well, they're only going to be my business partner and that's it. Also, rather than how's the task looking, here's a very good way to restructure, is you'd say, when can I expect this by, right? So I would use this in the government all the time because it was Sleepytown, USA, and nobody wanted to get anything done. I had some very stellar coworkers though but the vast majority of people were very, very slow to get around to giving results, right? So instead of saying how's that thing going that I sent out 3 weeks ago, it's like, dude, when can I expect this by, right? They will come up with a date at the end of the day, and then you can hold them to that. A little softer version of that would be when can the rest of us get the final version, right? So it's when can the rest of us, so now I'm using a little bit of social pressure, right? So everybody's waiting on you. Why are you holding this up is the intuition from that. At the end of the day, you have to make people accountable to themselves or to the group. That is the best way to do it. That is called being a leader, not a boss. If you make them accountable directly to you, you are being their boss. Try to lead. Don't try to lead them in that direction where they're going to have their own inception, basically, of, oh, that's my idea now that everybody is waiting on me. So don't tie them to you, though, at the end of the day. You don't really want to tie them towards their own responsibility or towards the group. All right, advanced profit criteria. This is my personal philosophy on this, is that you got to make more money than your last deal every single time. Because if you do that, you're going to increase your ability to make stuff, and you're going to be looking for bigger and bigger opportunities. Think about region beta paradox, right? Is looking for more money than you've ever made before on a deal every single time. Is that region beta paradox, or is that me forcing myself out of that every time? That is me forcing myself out of it every single time, right? And if you don't care about money as the particular variable, you could also look at it as dollar an hour. So you need to transition over your thinking process. Instead of trying to make the most money, you want to make it as efficiently as possible. Because if you only have, because everybody's only got 24 hours in a day, so the resource that you have to spend, everybody has the exact same resource, but some people are just outperforming others because of dollar an hour. It's not because they are just objectively doing something to make more money. It is they're more efficient at it at the end of the day. So make sure you're spending your time tokens, so to speak, the correct way. So as soon as you cover your bills, basically, then you need to start focusing on efficiency, right? So until then, flip couches, do whatever. If you're on that stage of life, that's totally fine. Everybody's been at zero at some point. Nobody's born at, everyone's net worth is technically zero until it's officially given through inheritance or whatever, if that's the case. But you get the point, right? Everybody's got the same time of the day. So focus on efficiency, and then focus on increasing your rate of dollar an hour, right? So you can do that by getting more skilled, get more leverage types, right? So it's like connection leverage or like network leverage or code leverage, whatever. Just become more skilled. So this is kind of like velocity and acceleration relative to position. If you ever took like physics, 1 or 2 or whatever they would call it in college or high school, right? But here's a really simple graph, right? If dollar is our position, if I do literally nothing, then it's the same dollar, right? Technically it would actually go down due to inflation, but that's semantics. If I do dollar an hour, that's what that graph looks like. So I make that much dollar per hour. But then dollar per hour increasing, right? So you want to make it as steep as possible, and then you also want it to be an exponential curve. So continue to really work on your own skills at the end of the day. Okay, this is the Bartlett method, which that's me, yep. But this is for parks, right? So this is a little bit of a hybrid with the individual collateralization for negative risk. This is how to do it for parks. So if you are ever dealing with a park-owned home, I would highly recommend you attempt the strategy if you're utilizing a bank. So you'd have the bank on first for the land, and the seller would be first for the homes. And then the home purchase price is going to be equal to the amount not purchased by the bank, right? So if you're doing it like this, it's kind of sort of like a Morby method, but the bank actually knows about it, but they don't care because it's not in the scope of the actual acquisition. So the reason why a Morby method is not good is you're doing a first and a second on the one piece of property that is being bought, and you're like not telling the bank about it. Versus here, I'm actually segregating it into 2 different purchases. It's purchasing the homes and purchasing the land separately technically, but it's on one contract. So that'd be like $1 million for the home plus the land. So I'm going to run the appraisal a certain way, or I'm going to structure the deal a certain way so that the appraiser gives the best possible outcome I can reasonably try to get. But at the end of the day, the appraiser is third party. I cannot control them, but I can certainly structure things in a way that makes it a little easier for them to justify a high land value. So you do like 70% loan to value of the land, so it'd be like $560K loan. And then the home purchase would be like $440K, right? So if you know, because I'm just specifying on the contract, hey, it's the remainder, right? I could do something like that. So I would just say, hey, you're going to 100% seller finance the loan, or 100% seller finance on the homes. And I can allow the seller on second position for the land as well, just to give them a little security. Because if they just have the homes, that would be a little squirrely, right? So at the end of the day there, I'm able to finance the whole acquisition, and the bank knows about it, and the bank's cool with it. And the seller has legal recourse on the land and on the homes. It's just what's to notice, though, is it is $200K collateral value on the homes, technically, according to the appraisal, right? That's what the appraisal is saying. The delta of the two is $200K-ish. But there's a $440K amount of debt, which is why you probably want to put them on second position debt on the land as well, because they're reasonably not going to accept $440,000 of debt on just the homes in that scenario. So allow them to be a second position on the land, but you got to tell your bank about that, obviously. And then also another item to note is it's even better if you can say it's 2 mortgages with the seller, one on the homes and one on the land, and then you can specify the land amount to be very, very small. But then it still applies for the other, for total collateral. If you want to know more about that, then just tune in for Wednesdays on the Discord server. So actually, which I'll talk about right here. So if you haven't learned anything, good for you. And you really must know a lot, and that's totally fine. But otherwise, hopefully I've taught at least one thing. Maybe one new method, one new thought process, maybe get a couple neurons going. So please pay me for all of this. In feedback, of course. If you just go online to the website, zero.landlord.com/feedback, I do pay attention to who gives feedback, and I do really, really appreciate it. So, and also you can join the email list and community for learning, networking, deal reviews, and that is, I'll show you. Gosh darn, I don't have the QR codes on there. I'm sorry, guys. Go to the one up there. It's zero.landlord.com. It's a pretty simple URL. So yeah, if you want to know more about Bartlett method or how to do super advanced structuring and whatnot, then that is going to be in the server. We're in here every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time as of now. But if you want to get up to date on the server events, then just go to the website. So I'm now going to pause the recording here so that I can answer some questions. But hopefully you found this very, very helpful. And the entire bootcamp is free. So if you haven't already seen day 1 through 4, then you should definitely go check that out. So I appreciate it, guys. Take care.